The Olympics are going to happen in Paris in 2024, but the surfing event is going to happen in Teahupo'o Bay at a legendary site in Tahiti, and a new construction of a tower, an aluminum tower that's going to be placed there for the Olympics. It's supposed to be temporary, but locals are worried about the fact that it's going to damage corals and damage fish for the local Tahitians. And there's a protest about it. And we're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. In this episode, we're going to be talking about all three of these things. We're going to talk about what's happening in the ocean, how to speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And that's what we're going to be talking about. It's going to be surrounding the Paris 2024 Olympics. And so obviously, anything that happens around the Olympics, when the Olympics goes to a new city, it's usually a huge bid by the city. They put together a proposal. That proposal goes into the Olympic Committee, and it's usually taken into account like number of years ahead of time, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ahead of time, maybe even longer, right? Or events, not even years, events, because usually it happens every 4 years. With the pandemic, it changed a little bit. Regardless, Paris won the 2024 bid for the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, and they're having the Olympics. And with every Olympics, what happens is in every city, they say, well, we're going to be bringing in millions and millions of people to watch the Olympic Games. So that means, a lot of times we have to build new venues. We have to ensure that everything is up to par. We have to make sure we clean up the city. Things like hotels raise their prices. It gets really expensive for locals, like the local people, as well as for the people who are going to visit, because they're like, this is an opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity for some cities, and we only get the Olympics every once in a while. So we want to make sure that everybody, benefits from that. So a lot of the times there are structures that are built, and in the past it's been very unsustainable in terms of, things that have been built, because they'll build stadiums or they'll build something new and then it'll stay up there forever, but then not used after the Olympics is gone. And so hundreds and millions of dollars is added in infrastructure to the cities that may not be long term. Or they may sit there long term, but they may not be used long term. Case in point, not the Olympics, but the last FIFA World Cup in, I believe it was Saudi Arabia. There were a lot of stadiums that were built, and there was a lot of human rights violations, or a lot of questions on human rights about the people who were brought in. Migrant workers are brought in to build those stadiums. The fact that the occupational health and safety was atrocious. A lot of people died putting in those stadiums. There's just a lot of allegations that went to Saudi Arabia, and that's what happens when you have, all of these, all these huge structures, and the world is on you. The world's eyes are on you to be able to put these structures into place. Now, today we're going to be talking about not necessarily what's happening in Paris proper, but what's happening for the surfing events that will happen during the Paris 2024 Olympics. That's going to happen in Tahiti, in a place called Teahupo'o Bay. And I apologize if I mispronounce that. I'll put the right spelling in the show notes. But Teahupo'o Bay is a bay where is known for surfing. It's got legendary waves, as well as it's known for its subsistence fishing, which is basically, artisanal fishing. Essentially, people go and fish for themselves, maybe sell the fish at local markets. The coral reef is the basis for that area. It's what causes the reef, what causes the waves, as well as what causes the fish to be produced and caught by these local fishing communities. Now, the big problem here with this, we talk about building structures as well as environmental sustainability, is there's going to be an aluminum tower that's going to be built for it's like a judging tower. So essentially, it's going to be built within the shallow coral reef. There's going to be concrete bases that are going to be put in there. And then, so there's going to be displacement of some of the reef. And then it's just a massive tower that's going to be placed with a boat that goes in and out. So obviously there's a lot of concern around there. Now, before I go into what the construction is going to involve and what we have to be careful of, you also have to look at what happens, like what the Olympic Committee is trying to do this time around. So the big thing around the Olympic Committee in Paris is they have a sustainability committee. They're trying to make everything as sustainable as possible. In other words, they're trying to reuse buildings. They're trying to reuse areas. In fact, even in Tahiti, instead of building an Olympic village, which would be like a headquarters for all the athletes to stay, they actually are going to use a cruise liner that's going to be in a port in Teahupo'o Bay. So, you're looking at this, and there's obviously some issues just with that, but they're not building anything new, so it's going to be temporary with that cruise ship coming in, and so that you still have technically quote unquote Olympic village, but it's nothing that's going to damage anything in the area, and it's not something that's a structure that's going to stay forever, but only be used slightly. So, there's some good things and bad things, and obviously all these problems come with the way they're doing the Olympics and just in general the way they do them. And so you have to take the good and the bad in this way, but there's a new thought process around it that the Olympic Committee is trying to do to make sure that things are sustainable. Now, is it right to do what they're doing? Probably not. But is it a step in the right direction? Yes. Unfortunately, trying to go sustainable, there are a lot of problems with that, right? It's a different way of thinking. It can be extremely expensive in certain tasks. There's a lot of greenwashing that goes around. And so, people are always on the lookout for this. So when Olympic committees or a big event tries to go sustainable, again, eyes are on them. Environmental groups are on them. Surfers are actually speaking up around this tower, and they are, they're supporting the locals who are saying, one, they're worried about the construction affecting the wave, and they're also worried. Two, they're worried about the coral reefs that are going to be damaged due to that. The other thing locals are worried about, is that when coral reefs are not protected and are damaged, you get a lot more algae that are built, right? And so when you get that algae that's built up around the corals, there's certain algae called Cetagera algae, and that can cause, it doesn't necessarily harm fish. The fish will eat the algae, but it could definitely harm people that are eating the fish. And there's definite harms in it. The harm is it harms the nervous system of the people. It basically becomes inedible. And so, what happens to the people who eat is they can't regulate their temperature. It affects their nervous system in that way. And obviously they get sick, and people who are relying on that fish for their protein in this small island, needs this. They need this to happen. And if they don't have it happen, they can get sick, and they can get hurt. So obviously they don't want that. So what have they done? So they've done a protest. Right? They've created videos on Instagram and TikTok to get their message out there. They've made them aware of made people aware of what's happening. They've put out a petition that has over 195,000 signatures, and I might add, is growing. Okay, so it's an online petition spearheaded by the Vai Era o Teahupo'o Association. It has now over 195,000 signatures. Okay, they have associations. The association is made up of a group of fishermen, farmers, surfers, and the population of Teahupo'o is young and old. So that's good to hear. So we're starting to get support. There's been one protest that I know of. There may have been more, but there's been efforts to protest the plans. And so the Olympic Committee heard that. They saw that, and they said, "Well, hold on a second. We want to do something good." So they've made a final decision to kind of figure out what they can do. So here are the alternatives. Here's what people want people to do. Here's what the local people want the committee to do. There is an existing wooden tower that is there, up and ready, and it's a judging tower that was actually used just recently in the August 2023 surfing championships that were done right there. So that's something that could be in use. Now, the Olympic Committee has deemed that unsafe for the Olympics. And what you consider unsafe and what is safe and what is being used I'm going to leave that up to the people, the engineers and so forth. There are certain guidelines, I assume, that the Olympics have to use compared to what maybe, local Tahitians have to use. I don't know, but it's something that, you have to kind of look at and assess to see who's got the more strict guidelines, and are they really that, do they need to be that strict? I mean, obviously safety is a huge thing. So how does that work when we're looking at, comparing safety rules in Tahiti compared to France? They're obviously connected politically, so it really will depend to see how that goes. I don't really have the basis to make an official judgment or statement on that. But the person who constructed the wooden tower, the company, has come out and said, hey, you know what? Our footings are fine. They're actually very safe, and you should be fine with it. But the Olympic Committee has deemed it not safe. So instead of continuing with just using the wooden tower and maybe expanding it, they say they can't expand it because the corals that have essentially colonize the footings, the concrete footings, said that if they disrupt or add more footings, you can disrupt the corals on those footings, and so they don't want to reinforce that or make any kind of alterations or expansion on that because they're worried about it. So what they've decided is like, hey, you know what? We hear you and we want to help, so we're going to continue with the construction. However, the surface area of the tower will be 25% smaller than the original plans. So it's making the same size as the existing wooden tower. But the weight of the new tower will now be 9 tons instead of the original 14 tons to reduce the load of the foundations, and it will be installed at the same site as the old wooden tower, where apparently there are less corals around the area. So that's what the proposal is. Okay. The original design required 72 rods measuring 4 meters tall to be drilled down into the reef and filled with concrete. The smaller size of the tower supposedly means that these foundation rods will not have to be driven down into as far into the seabed. So the plans also have drinking water and wastewater connections to the mainland have been scrapped, and internet and submarine electric cables will be removed after the event. The bulk of the proposed Olympic aluminum tower will be temporary. However, a 3-meter pole above sea level will remain. So other than the original construction, things are going to be temporary. But the local Teahupo'o's region are really worried about the actual construction. And so, they're talking, the other plans that they were talking about from the Olympic Committee were saying, hey, during the construction, we're going to try and lessen our impact. So we're going to have barges that are electrically propelled. They're going to have a shallower draft, meaning they will not affect the reefs. They will not ground on the reefs. They will make sure that doesn't happen, and so forth. However, the problem is that there have already been a barge out there to take a look at the area where the construction is going to happen. No construction has happened, but they're not necessarily happy with it. So there's a video that also depicts the damage done by corals by a propeller. So large groups of colorful coral have been sliced off, revealing the white skeleton within. This directly refutes the claim that the Olympic Committee statement that the smaller barge would eliminate any risk of damage to the coral. You have to remember, a lot of these places, the depth of the area is like maybe 5 feet at the most. So these barges are pretty heavy. They're going to be carrying concrete. It's going to make them even heavier. Their drafts are going to have to be super, super shallow before damaging it. And they said they have new videos from the Save Teahupo'o's Instagram account showed a barge at the building site on December 1st, 2023, just recently. One video shows a barge verified by witnesses as belonging to the local government inspecting the proposed tower site. The barge repeatedly gets stuck on the coral reef and attempts to free itself by revving the engines. So obviously damage is happening to that coral. There's been, the Instagram account basically shows the damage that's happened to that from propellers. And so they're saying, hold on a second. The local activists are saying, hold on a second here. You guys said that you're going to have shallower drafts, but now there's a trust. There's a misrepresentation of the trust. Trust has been broken, folks. Trust has been broken based on what you've said, and we don't want this to happen. We want to make sure that none of this happens. So this is where we're at. We're at the Olympics are right around the corner, right? They're going to be summer of 2024. I think the event is supposed to go on at the end of July for the surfing event. We are seeing an active campaign that's gotten the attention and required the Sustainability Committee and the Construction Committee to basically, for the Olympics, to basically come back with changes, but they're not going to do anything to the existing wooden judging tower that it was used just in August 2023 and have been deemed safe by them. The original engineers come out and said, hey, you know what, this is actually safe. You should be able to use it. So there's a lot of controversy around this surfing event. There's a worry that the wave is going to be affected in the long term. There's a worry that the actual construction, so the actual drilling, will destroy and affect the reef long term. You have to remember that the Olympics happened over a 2-week period. And in this case, it's going to happen really over a weekend for the surfing. Then the Olympics is going to leave. Paris will come out and say, this has been a successful event. This has been great. But then the locals of Teahupo'o are going to have to, live with this aluminum tower, temporary, but even this aluminum pole that's going to be out 3 meters above sea level. They're going to have to live with any damages that happen due to grounding by the barges, due to mistakes happening by the construction companies. They have to live there. They have to eat those fish for the rest of their lives and generations after that. There could be, some of it could be reversible, some of it could be irreversible, but the stuff, the damage that's reversible could happen, it could take about over a decade to fix or to get back into a normal sort of range. This is what happens when you have these large events that come into these local areas, and what people have been complaining about for a long, long time. This is not just a new thing. This is just affecting this local surfing spot, this legendary surfing spot, and it's affecting the local fishers that depend on the protein of the fish to survive, for not only for livelihoods but also for their own subsistence, right? And so this is a case where, a huge event comes in, makes changes, leaves, and then forgets about it. And the local community is like, hold on a second, we have to live here for the rest of our lives. We do not want this to happen. It'll be really interesting to see what happens. There's a lot of political will for this to happen. The local government seems to be on board. Like the Tahitian government seems to be on board. So it'll require a lot more voices to be heard. So I'm going to put a link to the petition. I'm going to put a link to the Instagram accounts and the TikTok accounts so you can get more information. And so hopefully that you can lend your ears or lend your signature to that petition that will continue to rise and rise and rise. And I would like to see more action done, even from an international level. Just be like, I will boycott the Olympics if this happens. I will not watch the Olympics if this happens. The stuff like that. And wanting to make sure that we make a voice. We want to make sure that, the Olympic Committee sees this type of stuff. Go on your social medias, right? Go on social media, tag the accounts and say, we need to talk about this more. We need to make sure that long-term damage is not done. Why can't we just use the existing structure? What is so wrong about this existing structure that, it's been used in August 2023? Why can't we use it later on? We'd like to see more of those explanations. We want to see more changes. If you're really concerned about sustainability, it's sustainability of the local areas that you affect. That's where it really comes down to. So I would like to see more of that. And I would like to see you lending your voice to that and your signature to that. So I'm going to put links to those action plans in the show notes, and I would love to hear your thoughts. You can hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean, or you can go to TikTok at Speak Up for Blue, and you can DM me on either one of those accounts. Let me know how you feel. I'm going to be posting a couple of videos next week on TikTok and Instagram so that you can, even when you want to comment to that, you can also comment on those as well. But thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. That's it for today. Have a great one. We'll talk to you soon, and happy conservation.